actually, 2026 budget workshop, fiscal year 2026 budget workshop. Go ahead.
And we're going to bring Nate up. I know there was a discussion, we obviously can't change the jet schedule for the budget, but there was a discussion to kind of understand a little bit better as well, especially with the SIP planning and other pieces. So wanted to tie that in here at the end. And I'll hand it over to Nate to discuss his memo and kind of where we're at.
You can pull the finance memo up if you have it. So we have, make sure my mic's closed. We have the finance memo. I think it should be part of your packet in front of you. But just kind of give us a, there we go. Gives you a brief overview of our bond capacity, kind of where we sit. There's a lot of numbers, figures on there. Just showing our state valuation, kind of break down where we're at. Number 3 shows our existing debt obligations. I don't want to go through each line by line, but just kind of show where we sit. And page 2 will show you kind of the,
I'm missing one.
Oh, I have 2, so.
Okay. Oh, just kidding.
I saw Tammy grab it off yours, and I was like, you shouldn't
How I
do that,
roll.
but yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
That's all right.
He's back.
Page 2, just kind of give you some city comparisons. You see I chose all cities with B names, not on purpose. But Biddeford, Brewer, Bath, kind of give you some ideas of similar cities in size. I know Ellsworth is obviously a unique city just kind of because we have the, the gateway to Acadia aspect. But to kind of show the comparisons of what their debt schedule is compared to ours. So I tried to find, like I said, similar budgets, but to show where their debt is at in comparison with ours, like I said, which is at just under 2 million. And then I don't know if we printed the graph that shows, each year and what our debt looks like. If not, we can probably pull it up. I don't honestly have it ready. I don't know.
It's an Excel sheet. I had that, I thought I sent that out too.
But that kind of just shows, I probably emailed it to Charlie, so it's okay.
Yeah, we factored in the band bond that we've already have in process for the 2.1 million, I believe, and just so what that will look like starting in probably spring of this year. It starts to get factored in, and then the following years, so that would go by. So just so that you can see that, and then where the debt kind of falls off at. It's really 2030. We get a little bit of debt relief in a couple of years, and then 2030 is when it falls down to like 800,000 per year. What's interesting to me about this is the valuation, kind of how they assess debt. So that when Ellsworth goes from $1 billion valuation in 2020 to $1.6 billion valuation, it's a different total debt ceiling. However, doing $222 million in debt probably isn't a good idea unless we're building the 2025 city council towers, 10,000 units, solve all our housing problems, and then have the city repeal all of your being city councilors. But it's interesting that you could have, are there cities with that level of debt? But to me, actually, the one that Bath was probably the most analogous. I like to use Brewer. Skowhegan is pretty close, but Bath, in terms of population, in terms of total valuation, are also around 1.6 billion. Also around is, I think, a very similar amount of debt. Lower than Brewer, which is good than as a comp area as well. And also, I feel like our growth profiles are probably a little similar to Bath rather than Brewer, just because of a lot of the sort of tourism increases.
Yes, ma'am.
Does this include the school debt as well, or is this just?
This is just the city. This is the city plus enterprise. And if you scroll over a little bit on the screen.
Because that would be taken into effect for the overall debt.
Yes, it
service
would.
as well.
Yeah,
this one as well.
you're 100% correct. Keep going. There you go. So total.
Okay, so it does include the bands then.
So yeah, the total here includes all the bands, bonds, and like I said, I put down the bottom. These are all obviously estimated numbers, percentages and stuff like that. And then general funds only obviously takes out the water and wastewater
And that,
portions.
Steve, before you say it, that 20 years that's just a number that's in there. I know you, we have not committed to a year term or anything like that. That's just
Trying to stop
something
that conversation, yeah. I did 10 years for the band that we're currently in, and then obviously this 1.6, just so you know, the 1.6 would be the track, the school, our city's portion of the school track, and the tanker for the fire department. So that's why the 1.6 is there.
It
And
looks
it-
like the peak comes next year at 2.1.
Yeah, this will be the peak.
That's the estimated.
Yeah, estimated peak there, and then obviously it slowly goes down.
And that's including if we were to move forward with the track and the tanker?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah, all those numbers are factored in, so that's the calculations,
Great.
so.
The 1.6 million is for the track and the tanker.
But I'll make sure that's in your binders as well. I apologize for not printing it out, but that's just gives you a overview.
Is it the same as page 775?
No, we updated
No.
it with the band, with the new stuff.
Okay, so
Yeah,
this
most
is
of the
out
figures,
too.
yeah, except obviously those columns, the band bond for 2024 and then potential 2026 would be added to those.
And I could see, Tammy, to your point, let's get the school in there, let's get the full numbers, maybe color coded a little bit.
Yeah, we could do that, if you want to see that.
Nate, does this include any of the planned upcoming bonding for like the drainage and those things that would incur and have been working with us on?
This is not, no.
Doesn't, so that'll be
Yeah.
upcoming on top of this?
Mm-hmm, yep.
That'd be a good thing, you know, that's in the enterprise accounts, not, right, that's not the general fund?
Not the drainage.
Oh, the drainage, right.
Yeah,
That's the general fund.
that's the general fund. Because what I can think of that we have coming up is the water treatment plant, which would be an enterprise fund, and then the sewer stuff, but
Uh-huh.
that drain project, that's, we've already received funding for, that would be bonded.
Okay, yeah.
So that,
The Oak Street, is that the,
Oak Street, that whole thing that brings everything,
through here?
I don't know where I am, to the river? To the river. And then plus, we had talked about, that's done in stages over, I don't know, we had that workshop on it. I can't
Yeah,
remember.
and the surveyors were actually out there
Yes.
surveying a few days ago, so we'll add that to the mix as just an anticipation,
Yeah, but somewhere around here, we have that whole presentation that they gave us, because it, over multiple years, and it'll take care of Maddox Avenue and that, all that kind of drainage in that area, the hospital area, over many years, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think the other thing we'll need to factor in is dredge. We had another conversation this week. Sarah, myself, the Army Corps of Engineers. You know, we have a pretty regular meeting with those folks. They're still weighing like the three options and the price piece. You know, I've heard from 300,000 to $1 million to nothing because depending. But you know, part of the piece was because we have so much wood pulp in there. And that's, you know, was the city allowed that to happen? A negative externality of allowing that kind of industry to do that for that long. It requires, like, if we didn't have that, the Army Corps would pay for the whole dredge. So we have to pay for the environmental degradation that happened prior. And there was the original idea of a CAD site that would be really expensive to do it at, but now we might be able to de-water it offshore and then truck it somewhere. So we're budgeting out like three options to see what what would be cheapest is obviously my preference, but what the Army Corps would think would best. So we'll factor that in, and then obviously SIP planning with Sarah. There's an enormous amount of deferred maintenance, you know, beyond what we've talked about in the 1 year. I know in my full budget memo I kind of pull out. This is what we put in the general fund for a few items. This is what we're doing in the remaining surplus band based on council recommendations. The next step will be early summer for the track and the tanker 4. And, you know, once we get that full SIP and our order of importance, you know, that won't look like that. Unless, you know, but fortunately, I think also that's a pretty reasonable amount of debt, thanks to some good work that people have been doing in Ellsworth before to not over debt service the city. And once we see that full amount of you know, depreciating assets and investment needs, how can we tailor it in for the next 10 years so that, you know, that level is fundable by our growth profile, by our tax rate growth, by services growth, all those pieces. And I think Michelle and Tammy Pirisa, or TIF, you know, we're gonna have that TIF conversation. I know you all looked ahead in funding some of your infrastructure projects through the expansion of a TIF district or the creation of a TIF district, you know, what could be in that category, what could be in the grants category. So it's not all just let's add debt to the general fund and service it there, but a layered strategy for how we attack that. And I believe, Sarah, in the request for proposals, which is already out on that piece, it mentions that we, you know, as part of the SIP planning, we'll include kind of some financial planning too.
Excuse me, I have a question. Excuse me. I'm looking at the potential projects, and it says school track, $1 million, city portion only. I recall that the overall cost of the track is $1 million, split 3 ways. But we are adding that full $1 million into the potential project cost,
I don't think that's a $3 million project, is it?
right?
Yeah, and we're gonna try to fundraise for a piece. So we have a
It
meeting.
was a third, a third, a third.
Third, and we have a meeting next week actually with Amy, myself, and some of our other team, and we're gonna start dialing in that. You know, she's had some conversations, but like, let's, you know, timing, pricing, who's gonna be the project manager on this, you know, kind of creation of fundraising plans. So, yeah, that might be less in
Well,
the future.
I know I struggle with it, even with the city paying 1/3. So to clarify, if we're looking at just the city portion, it ought to be,
That's my fault. That's a very expensive track. So, yeah,
yeah. Well, it's very expensive at $1 million overall, so.
it's gonna be high end.
Yeah, and it's just the surface of the track, but, yeah, maybe we'll,
Because they're already doing the lights, so the lighting doesn't have to be completed.
Yeah, I thought that was like 1.6 was the total and 600,000 was just the light portion.
I don't know.
I
Yeah.
remembered it's
Yeah.
1.6.
And the lights are being done this year.
Yeah.
in the
Yeah,
budget,
I
so
remember this being $1 million split 3 ways.
I think you're right, Nancy.
Well, yeah, let me,
So-
I'll readjust the numbers.
I'm getting a thumbs up behind you, so I think
And a
that's-
fundraising piece, yeah. That
Yeah, a third fundraised, a third city, and a third.
Yeah,
I know you all find this strange, but I'm really excited about that. I can't wait to, I love making fundraising calls. It's my favorite thing.
Oh, my God.
So what do we change this to, since this is,
I know, I've done it so,
Range of 30.
not right, I know. Get my script, be there with Amy, I feel like we're gonna be a good
well, I'll
tag
change
team.
it to obviously 333,000.
Just cross out the city portion only and
Yeah.
it becomes real.
Yeah, exactly.
well, no, because we're not gonna go
Yeah.
into debt for the full $1 million, so.
We got the other piece on the, we talked about with the Oak Street project or the drainage. This piece, we're gonna talk with, school, so we'll dial in. And again, this is
Just
not
update it
funding we
when-
have to give out,
Yeah,
this is just
yeah.
informational, we'll update it, maybe come back to a finance
But
committee
I
meeting.
still, I like for, like, clarity is really good. Even if the school track, we put the city portion is 350, knowing that that $1 million is an estimate,
Yeah,
Yeah, we can just do that now and send it out to you, and then maybe add.
just, yeah.
yeah,
So
I'll,
then now we're at 950 instead of 1.6.
yeah, I'll update the numbers and adjust accordingly. You'll have, the graph obviously will have different
Okay,
numbers.
and then, I mean, if you, then I
Something,
think there's more space if you wanted to add something about the road infrastructure, but clarity in what we're talking about for
Yeah.
potential projects as we go.
100%.
something to think about.
Yes, sir.
As I recall, all of these conversations about the school track, those were internal estimates. Those weren't external estimates.
Yep. And I've heard some other things on kind of, yeah, timelines and other pieces. Also, you know, if we're moving forward with this excavator, can the teams demo that? You know, Nate says yes, but we got a lot of things we're putting Public Works on.
Yeah, you really did a lot with Public Works.
So, you know, but we're gonna have that project planning meeting next week with the school. I'll get a little more details on that. And probably deserves coming back. I think one of the reasons we were excited to talk about it now too is there was some community saying when they saw in the SIP plan, why isn't the track in there? And like the track is you know, a big priority. We can't do all of that in this bonding, general fund cycle. That would just not, we have to bond for it. There's not enough funding outright in surplus band. So that Tanker 4 are like, that's our 1 year plan. Tanker 4, track plus the surplus band, plus a little bit in the general fund. And then we're gonna dial that in, and we think, even with these caveats, this is a pretty reasonable debt service, and then we'll get the full SIP, because there's a lot more roads to pave, and there's a lot of buildings that are falling apart. And then we'll have a little bit better idea beyond just the track and Tanker 4 of what's our full suite, what's critical now. We're gonna have that carve, after we do this road paving project, go through every road in Ellsworth and get a real data-driven assessment of every single stitch of road we have and spit out a 10-year plan that this is the road that needs maintenance this time, how that layers into all our other pieces, so. And how to spend the $220 million on the council towers.
Yeah.
Oh, sheesh.
Is that a solid plan to do the inventory of roads and condition? Because while we're doing it, can we also do sidewalks? I
Yeah,
remember asking, like, we don't know how many miles of sidewalks we have. Okay. Just since somebody's gonna be roaming the streets with some kind of a drone or something.
I don't know, what's like, kind of like a LiDAR car, like those Google cars would have the.
They have a machine that does the sidewalks too.
What will they think of next? What will they think of next? Any other questions on debt service? We got some next step action items, but great. And
Very helpful, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
we're going to switch to IRCI budget. And a little background too, I know Tracy, I'll introduce, as our consultant, hired earlier in the year to help us kind of revamp operations over there, get our spaces booked out, lead a lot of our business enterprise things. She's also been just doing a reaccounting of IRCI. I've kind of called it somewhat of an orphan. There was some great lead up. It was an amazing project, and then, it hasn't kind of had quite the city dedication on where we're at now, what the next steps could be. So this is a much more robust conversation that needs to include the Ellsworth Business Development Corporation and others. But I'm going to leave it to Tracy to maybe talk a little more about that and the budget with the council. Do you want to? Sure.
At the bike, ma'am?
Hi, everybody. First, I just want to say, you all have the report that I started. It was probably in your packets. And especially to like Michelle and Tammy, who've been here forever, the information that's in there is what I was able to glean from what's on the IRCI website, what I could find on the internet, and one document that I found in Jana's files that was the implementation packet. So if there's anything that you see that's not accurate, it's because I couldn't find anything more than what's in this report. So I don't want to offend anybody with misinformation, because you guys have it better than I do. But anyway, that's where the information came from. So I'm assuming you all took a look at it. It's long enough that the bullets are 1 page long. I'm happy to read through them, or if you just have questions, I can answer them.
Maybe I'll give, just for the folks on online that are listening to the discussion, may not have gotten through the memo before. IRCI is the Union River Center for Innovation. It's over at the waterfront marina area. I think it's celebrating its 10-year anniversary. Was sort of an amazing project developed by Mickey Sumter, who just received a big award at the Chamber last week, and a million other things she did, and Michelle and Tammy and this group did back then. I think it was up for sale at our marina property area, and they had Jackson Labs coming in, and it really was sort of an idea to create kind of a biotech incubator space as sort of a spin-off off of Jackson Labs. There was a few organizations that are listed here that were in that category. There was also kind of a work share, and that's kind of what it's developed in terms of the space rental. There's still one bioscience that's been there for a long time, but over time, there have been a few bioscience type folks who've been there, but they've, like any entrepreneurial space, some haven't made it through, some have moved to other places, and currently it's mostly kind of a longer term shared office rental space. Tracy's been doing a great job of revamping that. We had a lot of surplus space that wasn't even being used, so how do we get that back? Also, the state of the facility is any asset over 10 years is in need of an investment or refreshing. The MTI recently went through there and kind of analyzed our lab space, and it's a very small space for a lab. It doesn't really kind of have the larger lab capabilities that a few of the other places in Maine. Although I think, Tracy, you'd admit that other places in Maine are struggling like this too.
Yeah, the study that was facilitated through MTI was to look at all the community lab spaces in the state. And there's not more in your report, because when I put that report together, the report had not been finalized to MTI yet, so it was kind of vague. But there's 4 labs in the state. Ours is about 300 square feet, doesn't meet biosafety 1 levels for all intent and purposes. The other 3 range from 1,300 square feet to 3,000. And only one of them is used on a regular basis, and the others, well, one is just for the use of the university. So it's community lab, but it's not, because only the university can use it. And the other one has 1 tenant also. And so it's not, they're not performing the way people thought they would perform. And what has happened here in Ellsworth is the businesses that did incubate out of Erkey, most of them left for logistical reasons, because this is a beautiful place, but it's nowhere near Route 95 and trains and other things that get people and things from point A to point B. So you all know this better than I do, but there was a business attraction plan that was commissioned a couple of years back to see what businesses were suited to thrive here. And as you all know, it was health sciences, building trades, tourism, that's kind of a no-brainer, and the food industry. And so when I took this contract, I was with Matt Williams, who onboarded me, and he's like, we really want you to look into the food industry to see how viable that is and how that might fit into what Erkey 2.0 looks like. And so I put together a survey that we put online, and we focused it for building trades and food, because that's another industry that's not hinged on location, right? Everybody needs a contractor for whatever, electrical, plumbing. And the responses for the building survey questions were just not, there weren't a lot of them, but the food responses I got ranged from a farmer in Mary Blackstone to businesses on Main Street, restaurants, and others. And so we've convened what I'm calling a food advisory group, and we're meeting once a month. And there is a bigger project that was funded, that's a USDA grant, right, Nancy? That's doing the Down East food system?
American Food Systems through USDA.
Yeah, and so that's a bigger project that's looking at how to make Washington and Hancock counties look at a food system and maybe some kind of a food hub. And so Charlie opened that meeting a couple of weeks ago, and they have a 2-year window of fact-finding to try to come up with some tasks to then go after funding for to go forward. And here in Ellsworth, we like to move a little faster than that. So this group has reached out, the group that I'm meeting with has reached out to peers in the industry to see, you know, do we look at a community kitchen in the lab space at Erkey? Do we look at finding some place to provide shared cold storage and distribution, so that when John wants to get beer down to Portland and Happy Town Farm wants to get, I don't know, you know, cucumbers down to Portland, maybe they share a storage facility and they share a truck. It's all pipe dreams right now, but that's one of the really exciting things that's happening there, is people are talking about what to do with the center going forward. The office space rental is, we're about 75% capacity right now. From what I can see from the last 3 or 4 summers, we actually turned probably 20 tenants away every summer, and in the course of 6 months, from like May to the end of October, rented space out at a rate of 400 work days in 180 days. So there were people that came in and maybe they rented for a month, but then there were others that came in and rented for a day here and a day there. And so the first thing that I'm trying to do, and we have the equipment, is there's 3 floating desks that nobody's using, and there's an empty space. And so we're going to convert one of the offices into 3 more co-working spaces. So right now we have 3 fixed desk tenants that own their desks. So there's only 1 floating desk that's available. This will create 3 more, and we'll start marketing to short-term rentals around town and hotels, and probably the Ellsworth American's hotel wrap, just to let people know that whether it's you're visiting and you need a place to do some work, or you have guests in and you don't want them using your dining room for their office, that this is an option for them. And I'm looking into an automated booking system, because right now, there's no permanent staff there, and quite frankly, as a taxpayer, there's not enough income there to have a permanent staff person there. So to have a booking system that will take the need for humans out of the picture for a while, ultimately, with the space that's available now, it's probably worth about $8,000 a month if it's fully booked out and it's marketed properly. So I'm hoping that we get there. And what happens with the lab, I guess, is the lab space is going to be for a whole bunch more people to decide. But I'm doing some fact-finding to try to figure out what to do next with it. And also trying to create some buzz around the center in general. We just ran a 4-week entrepreneurial exploration workshop series, and I'm told that I came up with that name. It's not a very good marketing name because I can't even spit it out. But we had 19 people sign up, and at any given session, we had anywhere between 8 and 12 people in attendance because they didn't need to take the whole thing. And we had a facilitator from Coastal Enterprises, Inc. We had a facilitator from the Small Business Development Center. We had somebody from New Ventures, Maine. And we had, who was the fourth? Oh, Kitty Barbie from Barbie Business Associates to talk about finance with them. And it was really, really well received. They're looking for, people that took it want to take it again to get a different perspective on it. And so we're going to put the slides up online and plan on doing it again in the fall. And I'm trying to work out with the powers that be at HCTC to have students come in and actually video record the next 4 sessions so that we can actually put like YouTube videos up so people can get it on demand if they don't want to wait for the quarterly rotation of when we plan to run them. And there's all kinds of other classes being kicked around, succession planning, women in business, how to start a daycare center, things that we are finding that the community is saying, yeah, that would be really handy, and we know 5 people that would take the class. And then I'm trying to do some stuff on the back lawn, and so for 4 of the 8 concerts that are going to happen this summer that fund the, that support the grant, we're going to do what I'm calling an evening market on the lawn. And at this point, I have 3 or 4 vendors, and that's really all we have room for if they're going to bring canopies, which some of them will. But crafters, there's somebody from the Down East Wood Bank, and they apparently make woodware that they sell to raise money for the wood bank. He's all excited about coming. Tom Clark, when his knee is recovered from his surgery, wants to come and bring his pottery and display that. Haley from On the Horizon Food Truck, her truck is going to be parked at Lowe's for the entire season. She's not moving it except to gas it up when she needs to. But she's either going to take a table and have stuff there that people can buy. And rather than charge $25 a table and put it in Erky's pocket, because we're kind of like tapping into what the grant is already doing, I feel like we should just tell the vendors, look, we're not going to charge you for a table, but make a donation to the grant, because this event is, the evening is for them, and they're bringing 100 people here. So that's kind of in the works for 4 different dates, and I think I put the dates in your report. And then there's 2 other more businessy things planned. One of them is a definite, and that's going to be, we're going to do business after hours for the chamber on August 26th, I think it is.
28th.
28th. To celebrate the 10th anniversary. And because I'm a marketer, the first thing I did when I realized it was our 10th anniversary was to look at Maine Biz magazine to see what issues they had that might fall in line with some advertising that we might want to do or try to pitch a story. And it turns out that that issue, that August 28th issue or whatever it is their startups and entrepreneur issue. And so the feature stories are about startups and entrepreneurism, but they do this corresponding thing called lists. And the lists in that issue are going to be MTI funding and ways that you can get funding through MTI. So I've already reached out to MTI to ask them to sponsor the event and hopefully send somebody to be there and chat about how they were involved in the founding or in the support of Erky in the beginning and looking toward whatever the next decade's going to be. And there's also, not quite ironed out yet, but Dirigo Labs, which is another entity that manages government funding for larger sorry, I keep doing that. It's Italian. I should do this. Then I can't talk at all. Startups, federal funding, and they want to co-sponsor an event here that in the afternoon would be kind of a symposium for people that are looking for large funding from places like NOAA and other government organizations like that, and then do some kind of reception out on the lawn afterwards that talks about FAST funding, which is basically funding for small mom and pop kind of businesses that they too can facilitate. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and I'm just hoping that we get your blessings for me to keep going, because I'm pretty excited, and so are a lot of the people that I'm working with right now, so. Questions? Yes.
Excuse me. So, sounds like in the near term, the thoughts are making it more available for co-working spaces. Is there another co-working space in Ellsworth?
There used to be, and it's out of business.
Is that a business? Okay, that was my question. I wanted to make sure we weren't.
Yeah, I started to research co-working spaces, and there's supposedly one in Bar Harbor that is called Anchors, maybe, and I haven't had a chance to reach out to them. Sometimes it shows up in my searches, and sometimes it doesn't. I don't know if it's still there. But the one that used to be here is out of business. And the next nearest one, there's one in Blue Hill that's really tiny. There's another one in Belfast that's really tiny. And until you get into the Brunswick, Portland area, there's really nothing of any size.
It seems like in the near term, as a way to maximize the value of the property until we have this
I
figure out what
definitely
we're gonna
think
do.
that 80% of that property, regardless of what we decide to do with the lab, 80% of that building, the highest and best use is what it is, which is that kind of use, because A, there's not a lot of place to rent. And it's really kind of a cool community, not that that was the intent behind it, but there's 4 or 5 tenants that have been there for years. Tabby is kind of new to the fold. There is a stationary desk tenant who's in the big co-working space, but he's there 9 times out of 10 by himself because the others pop in and out. And he's been there 7 years. So people come and they don't go away. And they love the facility and love where it's located. And I think that we're really primed if we start advertising it, because there really hasn't been a lot to build on that. So.
Yeah, and to your point, Patrick, there's also another piece, like in the near term, exactly what Tracy said, kind of try to maximize the revenues that we're receiving for the kind of the highest demand that we're seeing there now. And then also, probably bring Tracy, myself, and others to EBDC. Was really instrumental in the founding of this, try to get their kind of guidance on the same thing we're talking to council about, which is here's where the state of the organization is, here's some of the history. And I think one of the immediate first steps is, here's the biolab. Do we want to invest more so that it can come up to the safety level that it would need to be to, compete in this kind of space and to attract this type of thing? Or do we want to move off the biolab concept? And what do we want to reimagine that as? Do we want to reimagine it as, we got a Parks and Rec director, that would be a great coming in potentially. And that would be a great space for a Parks and Rec director and maybe a department in that kind of lab and other space. Where Jim's up in the little half of an attic upstairs right now. We've got potentially a janitor coming in to help too, and so freeing up a little more space here in City Hall and having a few pieces, maybe economic development too, that can start partnering with PJ. We did look into the chamber moving that space. They kind of have a lease that won't get them out of there for a while. So, but what do we reimagine? If we want to reimagine that other piece and make a little bit more of investment to kind of, after 10 years, like anything, needs a little bit of a spruce up and, or not, or maybe it's all co-working, or maybe it's food, could anchor a great farmer's market. And gosh, that meeting at Woodlawn, there's demand there. All those people were super engaged. It was a great process. They really want a food ecosystem here, on the level of what Belfast has. And it seemed like there's the community here that's just looking as a service center to anchor our food service. That seems to me, if my gut was to say right now, that could be highest use. There's other people that have said our parking is in that area is completely overblown. This should be a parking lot. I'm not quite ready to go there yet. See Michelle looking, and I'd probably rather go to the parking structure state, but like a lot of Ellsworth things, there's a lot of demand on these areas. So it's a great location. I'm so glad that we have that to do something with. So near term, let's maximize the the property rents. Let's figure out what to do at the biolab space and how I want to redirect it and have a little bit more of a community imagining process of how to best go through that route in similar ways, which we'll start doing with the Parkland. We've been talking to Cara about as well, so. And I think the Cara has also got a grant application out for another community workspace, right? Or work.
We received one.
We received one. So maybe more on the way, Patrick. On the budget side of things, this is kind of a mistake from last year. There was just like a ... over for 25,000 in the budget, I believe, was kind of how it was structured. There wasn't like a full breakdown of the IRCI expenses, but one of the great things that Sarah and Tracy have been partnering on is actually, okay, here's what are these expenses, where are they at? And, so we're a little more dialed in on what the expenses are gonna be, and we're putting over 50,000, 12,000 for a capital outlay, for potential investments as we look at the biolab space, as we look to upgrading it, to coming back. So, just a little bit more. And this will be a little bit, because it's a first-year budget, unlike things, this is TIF funding, this isn't tied to the 2.9%. If you guys wanna say, we wanna get rid of this, we wanna add this, you're not gonna save anything on the mill, on this one. But this is kind of our best advice for this first year. Pulling in 50 instead of 25,000, it kind of operated at a loss this cycle. So getting a little more dialed in, having all the lines and start to manage them properly.
Charlie, what are the professional services that's under this?
So that was for Voot, who was the kind of biotech entrepreneur in residence, who's been in there, and then also for Tracy. I think there was a previous consultant that was also in there. So there's been 2 of those consultants. Tracy's consulted through July 1st. I'd probably want to continue with her, as you can see. She has an incredible passion for this space. Also, it's been very minimal help from the city manager. Sarah's been doing a great job partnering as we're looking, like an economic development director. This is going to be their piece too, right? They'll come here, partner with Tracy, partner with other folks. How does Twyla want to reimagine this space for economic development purposes? That's what I think its original intent was, and how do we keep the gas on that? So I think this allows Twyla a good budget on IRCI to partner with Tracy. If we don't move forward on the biotech, we might not move forward on the biotech entrepreneur or in residence kind of aspect. So that would be a little cost savings there on professional services, but I could see applying in other spaces as well.
Before we move away from this, I thought both of you have referenced me when you're talking about the meeting, and I just want to kind of update why people are looking at me for the meeting. So it's, one of the projects of Grow Smart Maine is the Down East Food System Partnership, and it is a 2-year program networking people in Washington and Hancock County, looking at how do we strengthen the food systems here, from the farmers, the growers, the foragers, up through everyone who eats. And so it's funded through, it's the Agricultural Marketing Service, American Farmland Trust, and a couple of foundations. And the launch meeting was maybe 3 weeks ago. And as Tracy was referencing, we had 60 people in the room. There was real energy. And the idea is that at the end of 2 years, we've got strategies moving forward that are coordinated. What did we need to make this food system work in this state so that we've got everything that we need for farmers and producers to thrive, and for us to have access to great foods and other products. And in the meantime, and again, it doesn't mean nothing happens for 2 years. The synergy that day, the table that I was at, where Tracy was connecting with a woman from Farm Drop, and already having meetings about how does Farm Drop do its job better of connecting farmers with users. So it's Grow Smart, Sunrise County Economic Council, and Healthy Acadia are all partners. It is fully funded by those organizations that I talked about, and I think is going to add real value. We're looking, is Ellsworth a food hub? There are dozens of different ways you could describe a food hub. So bringing that into the economic development and land conservation work that we're doing as a council. One of the staff there, Harold Bredesen, is leading it, and it's going to be pretty exciting. So that's why they kept turning to me when they were referencing it. This is part of my day job, supporting what we do as a council here. Just wanted to clarify that.
Awesome. Yeah, it was incredible meeting. Nancy runs incredible meetings like that. Those are usually not my favorite. It's a little bit like plans to have plans that will materialize 25 years from now. And I was like, this seems real.
I am not a fan of a 2-year plan because it's like we need to get things done now. But to Tracy's point, that let's get things rolling now. What can we do? What are the connections as we
And I think,
get that
it's
strategy?
important to know that
Tracy,
we
sorry.
did.
To the mic.
God.
I wasn't gonna say it this time, I was gonna let you do it.
It's important to know, like, as excited as we are, we're not gonna operate in a vacuum, and we did, Hannah Semler is the woman who runs Farm Drop, and she and I met, and she's been meeting with Harold, and
Yeah.
what we discussed at the big meeting was that basically it's a web, right? The food system is a web, and whatever the hubs turn out to be, you know, maybe here, we're just Restaurant Central, not that we're ever gonna be Portland, but we have a really good selection of restaurants, so maybe that is what our claim to fame is in Ellsworth, we don't know. But the communication will stay open, so that whatever we decide on here as a community, Harold and the bigger picture people will know about it, so that maybe it is, we decide we wanna take the whole building and make it cold storage, I'm just being silly, but that's what we decide to do. Well, they know now, we have a cold storage hub in Ellsworth, so whatever they come up with at the end of 2 years, they're not gonna duplicate that, because we've already established that we're gonna fill that need here. And maybe that's a little extreme, but just to give you an idea that we're not gonna waste dollars, our dollars or anybody else's, by doing double work. We're just gonna coordinate so that everybody gets the best. Can I go sit back down now?
Yeah, it's one of the things I love. Tracy and Twyla as well, like that collaboration piece. It's, I think, kind of the next steps that whenever we've talked about Erky, it's this person has this and this person has this. And
Yeah.
talking to these folks, and I'm really excited for this next year to, you know, we've got some great plans in place with the comp plan, these other things, passing a good budget. Let's, you know, we're going to zoom out to strategic conversations with the organization and what are the larger areas that we really want to focus on. What pieces of our work plan tie into those strategic areas already? And, you know, and what areas do we need to build capacity on and community involvement on? And I'm really excited about this work. I feel like Erky can kind of be an anchor space for some of that work too, so.
Cool.
Great. We can switch over to our favorite conversation, leases. I'm hoping this one's going to be fairly quick.
You got a handout for that.
Yeah, just this is the lease on the ARIA.
Before we go,
Yeah.
I would just like to say that I think the city is pouring $50,000 into this on this budget. And it sounds like we're pouring $50,000 into this for sheer exploration. And I think the $50,000 could be used elsewhere. We're paying 50 grand for the water department to lease space out at the mall, and you're paying 50 grand for this. There's $100,000 right there. Food for thought.
Steve, what did you say we're spending it for? Sheer?
Exploration.
Oh, what?
That's private industry stuff. That's not government stuff. Just my opinion. I'm one in 6 or 7 that doesn't see it that way, and that's fine. But I just have to think about Mr. and Mrs. Ellsworth for a second here and pumping 50 grand into that operation next year and another 50 to rent a building while we're exploring this. It bothers me.
And we can have further discussions with Twyla and, you know, this is going to be, you know, TIF is going to be a big part of the conversation in reimagining this piece. And, you know, we've already been spending this money, you know, we're budgeting for it now. We're already been spending this for, you know, many years now, about a decade in operating costs for this type of, as you're saying, private industry type piece. But,
While the water's running into City Hall, we're pumping money elsewhere.
but you know, we can talk about that as an option too, which is pulling away from Erky altogether. The parking lot option, I guess that would be what previous mentioned. I don't think there's a lot of support for that, but you know, we can discuss, and we will when Twyla's here. I know Tracy. This is really kind of, you know, as you saw in that memo. Here's where we're at. Here's where we've been. Here's some very broad ideas. It's not 50,000 to invest in all of those ideas or any of them really. It's just you know, we're going to try and maximize the current renters that are coming in there to make sure it's rented out. And then we'll come back to council, once we've talked to EVDC and probably could do a process of what we want to do with that building.
If I can, I know you're gonna be shocked, Steve, but I agree with you.
You all right?
I know, I must be having a hot flash or something, I don't know. So when Erky was created, and the thought was coming up, you're exactly right, it was a bioscience, and it was to go along with MDI Biolab and Jackson Lab. And there, at that time, there was new software coming out, this was like, well, I've been gone 10 years, so 12, 13 years ago. So, at that time, there was a lot of people that were coming to ask us for this space because there wasn't any place to do that, and we were looking at all kinds of places. And this was actually before, I wasn't even part of that building. I had left before that building was even there. But the reasoning for this was, it was an economic development project that MTI was helping us with to create this, because at the time, the idea was you help these people create a business, and then because those labs and things are still here, they would stay here, right, and create business. It's been 12 or 13 years, and it's not working. I just, is it time, I like the idea of pivoting, but I don't, by now, it had if I remember correctly, it had a 5-year plan of coming off the grants and being self-sustaining. So, it's not,
It was
obviously.
something like market rents in there as well. and-
Exactly. So we're now 12 or 13 years in, and we're spending $50,000 of TIF money, but it's TIF money that could be used for other projects. And the building is there, it's a gorgeous building, and I wouldn't recommend selling it, but I think, there are other things that we could do with that building. As much as I hate to say this, because I, was part of the group that was, really on board with this project, but it doesn't seem to be working. So either we pivot and start making money on it, or we give up that process, where if we've been 13 years and no one has stayed in the city, it's failing.
Yeah, I think that's another. I've had thoughts of, can we sell it to LL Bean and they can rent canoes out of there? And let Pure Kayaks for the,
Yeah.
do we maybe give it to a nonprofit or sell it and then they can operate it? It's no longer a loss for us, but we have some kind of long-term lease for them. There's a whole range of things to go your route, and Michelle, what you're talking about. Or maximizing with that biotech space that we can make there is not shared office space in Ellsworth, it is a demand and a need to have that here. Could we make it cost neutral with that, so it's not on the city itself? All those things I think should be on the table.
But I don't think that, and then there's a question of whether that's even TIF money if you're renting space for seasonal.
Really good point.
I'm not positive you'd even would be able to fund that with TIF money. You would have to do it, it'd have to be self-sustaining, or it'd have to be taxpayer dollars, so. I just think that when you're moving forward with this, we can keep it in the budget so that we can continue but as you're looking at things to do, I think we really need to look at a self-sustaining business and not.
Yeah.
Are you still sitting in your chair, Steve?
I'm strapped in. It's a hard subject to fire out, okay, because you hear a lot of support. And it's a hard subject to fire an arrow at this situation, but at the end of the day, it's 50 grand in next year's budget, and Charlie just said it's been going on for how many years at that money. So, that, over 10 years, that's $1 million. I don't know.
It's 500.
I'm sorry,
No, we were only
20
doing
years.
we were only doing 25. It just increased to 50,000 this year. Is that what it is?
Yeah, well, it was a loss at 25 last year.
Yeah, but
So, yeah, it's to make it kind of budget positive with a $12,000, it's in tough shape. You go over there, this is not it, so.
It-
So we can also, before we do any, we'll come back to the council on, any kind of new investment there.
I think it should be kind of prioritized before we,
Yep,
spend too much
it's
money.
first on Twyla's,
Not that I want to kick you out of your space.
Yeah, I totally understand that.
No, but at the same time, yeah, those folks are also paying, like, so in the near term, I wouldn't want to do that either, because
Exactly,
then we're
it
even.
just, there's a graceful way of doing this, but
But,
I just think.
again, there's 50 grand right here, and just because it wasn't budgeted last year, if it was over budget, you were still spending the money,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah,
Well, I
and I
think
think, you
this
know,
is-
at 50 grand for 12 months, you know, $4,500 a month, that we can take a couple months, we don't kick people out and say, you know,
Oh,
find
no,
out,
no,
you know,
but
um,
it's,
I do think it needs to,
Yeah, and these are, you know, general estimates too, or kind of, you know, it's not necessarily gonna be
Yeah.
that as much, just gives the capacity there. And it's not, it's really the 25 from last year, not 50, but.
let private industry do private industry. Government doesn't
Nancy?
need to be involved.
I think there are two different pieces to this, and I think having this in here for the year with the pivot and figure out what the role is. One is the programming, and I think that public-private partnerships make a lot of sense for this kind of thing. And for whatever reason, it was on that track for 10 years, that pivoting. That's the programming. I think separate from that is a conversation about that building on that location, and what's the highest and best use for
Yeah.
that
Absolutely.
building. It's waterfront. And if the city keeps it, which, again, there's value in that, what is the best use for it? I think having a year for both of those conversations about what is the city's role in economic development, is this how we invest in it? And what's the best use of a tired building, but an okay building that's in an extraordinary location?
That's the other thing too, is it's not just the 20, like, that's kept this building operating, it's where it's at, it's in much better condition than Pump House Point, which is essentially, like, we also pay for to a certain
It's
extent.
another one we need to look at.
But that we
what's the
haven't,
best use,
so
yeah.
like, that one could be really a recreational opportunity, there could be Parks and Rec down there, we could be renting things, we could make it like a beautiful space, it could have this other piece, there could be a reimagining. But, you know, this is still keeping that space occupied, keeping, you know, some level of income as opposed to a depreciating asset like Pump House Point, which is, you know, more and more, can the city ever go back in there? Do we have to, does that have to be sold to be a recreational piece? How does that fit to this? I think that's kind of Sarah's SIP planning too. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, we gotta prioritize what to do about Erky, how it ties into the rest of things, and to your point, Steve, have some tough conversations.
Sounds like it really Erky's used to.
Do you know, we talked about calling it the Union River Center for
Turkey?
Innovation? Turkey.
Oh, that would have been, why didn't you do that?
No,
Turkey is tough.
Yeah,
Turkey, I would almost
turkey.
go with.
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I didn't know that, that's a riot. Turkey.
Other than rental revenue, there's not a lot of hard metrics, hard sort of data that would speak to the successes of this as a enhancement of economic ecosystem. I don't think we're like throwing 50,000 away every year. I think it's an investment. It's a gamble, but governments are involved with designing how economic development goes in their purviews, in their areas. And so this is an opportunity for, like, let's try to bring in, and I think a pivot is needed, but this is sort of a well-informed specialty food, beverage, building, health services and tourism. Like, at least there have been studies and we sort of know what that pivot needs to be. So having our next econ dev sort of come up with these metrics of like, listen, we're sort of worried now, we've been spending this money for so long, let's figure out how to show next year what we've gained, because it's complex. It's not like we paved a road, now the road's paved. It's like we're spending money, and then down the line, these people, maybe they're not staying, but they're supporting local businesses, maybe they do stay, maybe they bring in other people who are building more houses. I don't know, it's complex, but finding some of those metrics to look at next year and say like, oh, we are gaining here, and so it's worth the investment.
Yeah, and how does it tie into our larger strategies and planning, and like maybe there's a piece of that goes towards this for economic development that it needs to be in, or maybe it is like, yeah, it's all a little bit too loosey-goosey in Steve's terms, maybe I just made that up and put it in your mouth, but it's a little, it's a little loose, and that's like, it could be that system, but or let's part ways, save money, and focus on other things, because like, it's also time. You know, if it's not working, to your point, Michelle, we've tried it, had some great ideas. If there's not something that we're really just super passionate about that fits into our strategic planning and our business attraction plan and other pieces, then maybe because that is in the business attraction plan, is a co-working space that's needed here to help this piece. So how do we make it a great co-working space that's doing, siphoning off thing, creating like an economic development hub, or not? Good conversation.
You're welcome for extending the meeting for an hour.
Sorry. I'm hoping we
that
go.
when
to be advertised?
I know.
Wow.
So we had a conversation with Enterprise, and and talked to Jim with facilities, and I'm sorry, they're working on getting us an updated lease, but it's really the where we've kind of landed is for the Public Works administration vehicle is to move forward with the Nissan Ariya with the $590 a month level, which we did look into the Leaf. I wanted to think about just a little clown car for that group, but that thing to go on, for Amanda to take that to the water department and some of the back roads and not having four-wheel drive, it was like a little bit too small, not equipped enough of a vehicle. So
I've never
having-
even heard of a Leaf. What is a Leaf?
It's like a Prius, a very small loader to the ground. Cheaper, which is why we were looking at it, but this is not a,
The Yugo's coming back.
is it?
It is, seriously.
Really?
I saw it on TV. They're bringing the Yugos back.
So we actually just talked about that because on this, so this is, we've built this into the current levels, so, we're still at the 2.9%. Honestly, if we took it out, if we kept it in, if we wanted to go to a bigger, it's not gonna change the budget that much. This is a pretty small one. We did talk, we also factored in, we couldn't get the quote by now, but he says he's got a quote coming from Enterprise for a similar level for a Ford Ranger, which is like the smaller truck for the janitorial services. We talked about maybe having a similar thing to this Nissan Ariya, but like, we really feel like a Ranger with probably adding a little cab for somebody that's gonna be picking up trash in different areas, so a much smaller truck. I've been talking to Mike today, this isn't gonna affect the budget too much, but there's a couple pieces that were F-150s that we might be able to start, if they're not, if they're not doing plowing, which you need the 250 for, let's start switching to the Ranger, a smaller car. That's not a discussion here, that's just something as our lease cycles come in and out, like we're gonna go towards that. So the recommendation here is just to move forward with the Ariya at the 590 level for the Public Works Administration. That'll be split a third, and a third, so this is only a third to the city general fund portion that's built in the budget, although the 590 round level for the Ford Ranger, I'll get you a final lease, that's just what we're budgeting in general. For the Ford Ranger, in the facilities budget for the janitorial services, I'd also mention another piece which, that will put the city with the two EVs, one in code, one is the Public Works Administration vehicle. There'll be, in early June, I'll have the city council meeting on Monday where, is the likely installation of those two areas. So we'd have two areas marked off for those vehicles to charge overnight. They would also not be take-home vehicles. I think they'll be, used during the day and then brought there. We talked to Enterprise, not just about these leases, but about a much more robust tracking system of all of our vehicles that are under their lease, so that we know immediate mileage, seatbelts being put in, tracking of similar to what the police has. They even have a camera inside that they'll do, but I said we don't need the cameras. That's a little bit too big brother for me. But making sure that all the maintenance things happen, like it's one of the advantages of the Enterprise system as well, that we have just a lot better, oversight of all the vehicles. It's a piece to me, I hear it all the time of our vehicles are going here, there, and everywhere, and I've seen them out of the city. Now, that's by design, that's why, we have, as a prior precedent on the police vehicles being take-home vehicles to a lot of other areas, so that's, we're not saying we're going back on that, but also policies that when we acquire these vehicles, that these are, so the council know these are not gonna be take-home vehicles, they're gonna be parked at City Hall every night. And we'll kind of monitor the mileage too. It's the other piece of this, the mileage. We want to maximize the use of these vehicles. We're kind of going, this whole lease project is going from a structure of just buying them at cost and, and running them until they rust out to the ground to being like, these are, we're basically leasing them from a company, we're swapping them out, they're trying to maximize the value. And that's kind of the policy moving forward. But, and then we had some general conversations, I know, in the budget with the schools. We didn't quite get there, but I think there are a fair amount of the school vehicles that might be able to take advantage a lease type program and save some significant funding as well. They actually have a lot of vehicles that are in the leasable category rather than our kind of larger vehicles that are kind of unleasable. That's where we're at there. And then Sarah in the SIP with our kind of fleet management, sure, there's the lease vehicles that we have, but then there's also the ones that are unleasable, and how do we give the same level of monitoring and data and tracking of mileage and turnover and maximizing value to those vehicles that, that we're currently doing, having Enterprise here. Big thanks to Sean, who helped out on this piece. He's not required to help us with the overall city leasing plan. He's had nothing to do with him, but he's been great there. I'd also mention for Scott and I talked about, we don't think it's quite the vehicle on this kind of Nissan Ariya that the fire department needs. We're going to kind of come back to the table next cycle with a little bit more detail for council on the fire code vehicle, how that would be outfitted. So we're kind of just tabling that for a little while, but we'll come back to the next budget cycle, which I think will start in October this year, to really do a lot of planning at the front end before we go next. But Steve,
So what is this vehicle gonna be used for?
it's the Public Works Administrator, Amanda, who does a ton of driving between all the facilities. And then they'll also be used as, we talked about a little bit last time, a bit of a checkout system for this vehicle as well, so that we oftentimes rent cars to go on longer trips or use mileage, and this is going to be for all the conferences for MMAs, those types of things. We'll have a checkout system for it, which is also part of Enterprise's checkout piece too. So it's for the Public Works Administrator, sort of the only piece of the Public Works team that doesn't have a city vehicle to go from all the different places all the time.
Okay, I didn't even know what this was, and I looked at it, and I understand now, but could you elaborate a little bit more on this Ford Ranger business that you're talking about? My concern is this, is that you're buying something to work with, for crying out loud. You better buy a work truck, not a toy. And a Ranger is a toy. And now maybe some of the other people riding around town in these 3/4 ton pickups that don't need pickups might be something. But if you're gonna buy a man a work truck,
I pulled a black bear out of the woods with a Ford Ranger last summer.
Yeah, I think it's more the size of the Ford Ranger. I mean,
It's just, it's still, that's gonna be used for what?
The
but that's
janitor.
not in here.
The janitor, so that's just, yeah.
Yeah, okay, but, all right, buy something everybody can use, not something one can use.
I think it's,
That's
Jim
my
wanted us
point.
to get a Hugo, and I think he was originally okay. This came up last council conversation. Just yes, if we're adding a janitor, they're going to need to be going all these facilities all the time. Maybe we also do the Aria, the similar thing. That's kind of where we talked more about it. It's like this person might need a little bit more, but they don't need an F-150 at $1,000 a month.
But
level
this
vehicle.
is only the one Nissan, this thing, right?
Yeah, and like I said, I couldn't get the final quote from Enterprise, but they confirmed today it'll be around the 590 level. So I'll come back with the final. That's what we're budgeting, but we want to be in the Ford Ranger size vehicle with a cab. Jim had
I'm
to.
confused again.
He didn't even want 4-wheel drive, but
I'm confused a little bit. Are we talking about two vehicles or one?
Two.
But we've got one quote here?
yes,
We don't have a Ranger quote.
we don't have the Ranger quote yet, but I've been told by Enterprise that it'll be about the 590 level, so that's what we're budgeting. We're not at a lease area.
Oh, yeah. Jim, since this is your vehicle, you want to explain why?
Well,
How you feeling?
I was just looking for something cheap because this janitorial position primarily is janitorial. And they're gonna be in the summertime, 5 months of the year, traveling throughout the city, 3 public bathrooms. 2 of them are daily, plus City Hall, plus the police department. The locations all have on-site janitorial supplies, so basically it's just transportation. It's not so much a work truck like what I use. I haul stuff, lumber, debris, that sort of thing. They may have to haul, some cleaning supplies, and so the suggestion was a small, like a Maverick, but I guess it went to a Ranger now.
Oh, it was a Maverick, sorry.
Yeah, I think it was a
The
Maverick.
small-
It was like
the
a
small
car.
pickup
It was like
truck,
a
yeah.
car, but it has a pickup body on it. So if they go up to Knowlton Park, and time permits, they can walk around, they can pick up the trash, throw it in the back, it's got a small pickup body on it. It's not gonna be a plow truck. They're not gonna be hauling gravel. that sort of thing. It's more of a pickup utility vehicle type deal. It's mostly just transportation around the city. And again, I was looking for something cheap, asked the guy, what do you got cheap? You got a Yugo? And they said the front-wheel drive Maverick was about the cheapest you can go for somewhere in the ballpark of 22.
Yeah, and the reason we're at more of the 30 level at the 590, and again, this is just general budgeting, but the four-wheel drive, Jim said just the two-wheel drive, but
Yeah.
I think the four-wheel
I mean,
drive.
hell, I
already
drove that
is-
rear-wheel drive Econo van whole winter and didn't have any problems. And, if it's gonna be a snowstorm, this person's gonna be assisting in snow removal and they'll be with me anyway and in the pickup that's four-wheel drive. So, the extra expense of a four-wheel drive as compared to some sort of utility front-wheel drive vehicle is more cost-effective to the taxpayers, I think. But-
It's a good point. Now, we can bring the two-wheel drive option to save a little bit when we bring the final quotes. I think we'll still budget around this level. Again, this is not the make or break on the budget piece, but for these two to be at the 590 level for the Public Works Administrator vehicle and the janitorial vehicle. And that was just one thing I missed when we decided to made sense to bring in a janitor because of the other vendors were paying at a pretty good premium to do that, and it wasn't that much more to go to a full-time janitor, which used to be in the city, and we're gonna get 1,000+ hours more service, and but then didn't quite figure in the vehicle piece, and this seems like the right option. So, but happy to just budget and then also bring back the final specs here.
Okay, so to clarify, these two were not yet in the budget, that's why we're talking about them tonight? Or is this more detail on something that's already been budgeted?
They're in the budget. We can pull them out. If you'd like to
Okay.
say no to both of these things, Jim can double up with the janitor and.
Just looking for clarification on where we are, these are already budgeted.
Yep.
So- And if I can make a pitch for small pickup trucks, I worked in the woods for 7 of my 13 years for International Paper. I had the full-sized 4-door crew cab with an 8-foot bed, and I also had a Chevy S10. I had chains to put on the tires when I was going into the woods, but the Chevy S10 was great. So I think the small pickups, and again, we're talking, I did not haul out a bear, but did my share of going on gravel roads, and the small pickups are fine.
My
That was a
brother-
long time ago, I'm sure they're better.
My brother had the S10 and it had that like tiny little back row. I remember going on ski trips as a little kid, like just squished into that thing trying to
The
see.
jump seat of the,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so we're just,
So those two are
Trying
budgeted
to
in
burn.
at the 590 level for the two vehicles. We'd come back
yeah.
for finalization of that piece, but again, you can say no now, it's not gonna, we're still gonna be at that 2.9% level.
And I appreciate you being
Frugal.
fiscally responsible.
Steve's still chewing.
Sorry. He's got it's a bias against small trucks. My dad had an S10 and he used to haul around crates of lobsters. So, anyways, go ahead.
So, in this week's warrant, I saw that we're paying our finance staff to go back and forth to the bank. So I think it would be beneficial if this vehicle for the public administration person could use that, so we could kind of cut some of our mileage payments to some of the staff.
Yeah, and I think,
And that would be a significant savings.
and Ashley, what were you saying? You did the math on this with the mileage, right?
Yeah, I did the math for Amanda. If because we do it off the federal rate, which is 70 cents a mile. It pays for itself. I think it was like 2,400 miles. We would have already paid the full year's lease on the municipal side of the lease for this Public Works Administration car. Because the mileage right now, 70 cents a mile, just kills us.
That is so much.
It is.
Yeah.
They don't bring it down. The price of gas is half of what it was a couple of years ago.
I remember there's maintenance on vehicles too. It's
Yeah.
not the only.
Yeah,
But
it's
still, I mean,
it's
gas
the-
was $4.
yeah,
I can
it's
see
the
when gas
maintenance,
was
it's-
$4.
Yeah, and we have I think people rent cars too to go on some of these.
Yeah, so it's in our ordinance too, where you can rent a car, or you can get mileage. A lot of people rent the cars because if you are in your personal car and you wreck, there's something with our insurance with MMA that it doesn't cover us as our vehicle, but it will cover the person's other vehicle. if they
Exactly.
cause the
That's how
wreck.
those work.
So a lot of people do rent vehicles, which is a huge cost to the city as well.
And Tabitha and I talked about, her experience in New York City and kind of a checkout system for vehicles. And yeah, on our lease cycle, on what we're getting for mileage, tracking all these pieces, like to maximize that piece as opposed to every single person they're tagged to necessarily, but getting more of that, so.
I wonder, is it gonna be logistically more difficult, given that Amanda's office is not here at City Hall, and then having to share it with people at City Hall? That, I don't know, it feels like coordination.
If the car's gonna stay here though, right? And then she comes.
Yeah, the car would
across.
stay here, it's parked here with the EV charger, and we're gonna kind of see how this goes. Like,
Yeah.
she oftentimes needs to do it, she's going around, but if she's not, she's there and somebody else needs to take it on a trip. And also Public Works team too, they're oftentimes going as a group of all four of them to go to Brewer. They were at a highway conference recently, they take that vehicle as all four of them, so,
Thanks, Jim.
You're good.
You're getting tired of standing?
I had conversations with Mike, and I told him he didn't have to be here tonight. I think he's on vacation, but he's still coming to meetings. I said, "Don't come
That's not
tonight."
actually vacation.
No, that's Mike though. He did mention this as the Public Works Administrator. It's not just Amanda's vehicle. Like, we're going to be using it for a lot of pieces, and yeah.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how that works out, and if it's more difficult or.
And they have a checkout system, so there's a whole, this is kind of a pilot. And
Yeah.
to Ashley and how much we're spending on this, does it make sense to get one more that's just the utility vehicle? What's the actual cost? And now that the finance team is getting over the hump on some of the foundational work they've been doing, they can start dialing into these, I'm seeing this pattern of a lot of mileage reimbursement. Maybe we should, we've got these EV chargers out here, we can get a set rate on that, we have a system for it. Maybe this makes sense to have a vehicle that people have to check out rather than renting and doing these other things. As a growing city, we're not New York City for a massive fleet of rentals to have, but we are growing and getting out of the okay, we'll just give everybody a vehicle that needs one, and then it kind of gets around to, we'll wait until it falls down to, we're tracking every single piece of this, maximizing the value, turning them over. That was the other thing we talked to Enterprise too. We think we got 1 or 2 more years left before we see the real value of the lease cycle, when we kind of trade in our sets, get a new pieces on that would be the first round of the police vehicles. So that we should see some savings there too.
I appreciate you analyzing all that data and
Yeah.
figuring out what those numbers are. That's great.
Great. Any release questions?
Can I suggest when we go to the next item, ask if there's members of the public who are interested in speaking about the budget overview? I think we've got at least one.
Yeah, and does anybody need a break too? Are we good on that? Or let's just get through it. We only got one more item left. So let's get through it.
Yeah, if we can go till 8, that would be great.
I think this humidity is like weirding me out.
I'm turning
I'm
this on
watching
and
it.
and it prevents me from hearing you. But I don't think it's doing anything. I don't know if I've done something wrong.
Well, you don't have to listen to Charlie.
Drive on
I
down the
know,
corner.
seriously,
See what's
when you
going
go
on.
low, I cannot hear a word you're saying because I got this in my ear.
Oh.
There's a breeze.
Is there a breeze?
I don't know if it's warm or cold.
Sorry, that sucks doesn't blow.
Huh?
It blows from the ceiling and sucks in there.
No, that's what I'm feeling.
Well, that's not working. Should I be feeling the ceiling? Do I need to do something?
No, because the chills no.
Oh,
Chillers.
Oh, well, so we're having this blow for no reason?
Yeah.
Well, you're getting outside air.
I think you're getting moldy air that's been in there for.
Well, I've been reading your lips for no reason at all.
You've been understanding it?
It's been hard. All right.
Public? Want to open up to the public? Happy to do that. Do we have some?
Cara Romano, Director of the Downtown Organization Heart of Ellsworth. As time goes on, I'm hoping that there will be more public discussion, whether public means city council meetings or workshops or whatever, around some of the different facilities and the programming that they're offering. I think there is an even wider breadth of community organizations' input that could perhaps help sort of cross-reference things that are happening in the city that might be able to reinforce some things that are sort of being done at a super grassroots level. And also just sort of widening the scope of other facilities that are already doing certain things in the city, just to help save resources and money and staff and things like that. So I just wanted to kind of call that out. So, thank you.
Yeah, we've got an interesting proposal for as part of kind of the website development that was here on like a community calendar and the web upgrade on that can like scrape. You give it to certain sites, Heart of Ellsworth, Ellsworth American, our own, the library, YMCA, and we kind of, it just aggregates anybody who posts there into like one sort of city community. We had like a double book on a tree pruning from both City Hall and in the library. So we have been having some communications exercise, like how do we avoid that? Like they're on the same day. They weren't exactly the same type of thing, but you know, how do we get better at coordinating that type of thing? So there's,
Yeah, I mean, and even with what, oh, she's gone, what was being spoken about with Erky, some of those things, those services and those programmings can be done with the school department through adult ed, and those kind of classes, and, like with, Heart of Ellsworth, the creative economy, and then the food services. I mean, there are so many different, everyone's doing their pieces, and, you know, maybe it's time for the city to come together and try to work with all those, which I think is your plan for Twyla, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
So it's a web, again, I just, you mentioned that, I went down to Erky today for their, I forget what it's called, digital desk. My work computer was aggravating me, and it is, adult ed is running the service for helping you figure out your,
Oh, really?
your tech issues. So Erky is working with adult ed on that, I just wanted to point out. But it comes back to the same, the conversation we had about food system and the web. It's like, who's mapping the web to know, yes, adult ed is working with Erky, and how are all the pieces coming together?
Yeah.
It's really valuable to be able to see that. We'd say avoiding redundancy, but the more there's coordination of effort, the stronger it is, so.
Yeah,
A lot
which
of
comes
those-
to your point with the extra information,
Oh, yeah, the metrics.
the metrics, yeah.
A lot of those conversations did happen as part of the comp plan subcommittee meetings. So it was like, let's focus on food systems, and all the players in that field showed up and had a discussion. Here's what we're doing, here's what we're seeing. So that
Yeah.
information made it onto the comp plan. I'm sure there's notes somewhere about who was there to discuss those things.
Great, anyone else? Okay, we'll pop open.
You know, Nancy's looking at me.
I just want to make sure, I don't know if you're shy, or if you
No, no.
just decided not to speak.
I'm Michael Reisman, and I'm a resident. But I thought maybe there was, in the discussion of the budget, that the topic that, you know, I was asked to come and talk about would come up, and it hasn't come up. And I'm not even exactly sure what the item is in the budget, but I think it's to do with walking. I've been walking a lot lately, as far as sidewalks and plowing sidewalks and building more sidewalks to get people from, you know, downtown to Harbor Park. And one thing I live on Franklin Street, and you can walk from Franklin Street Parklet to Harbor Park by way of Franklin Street, by way of sidewalk, except for on Franklin Street where I live, there's no sidewalk there. And one of the comp plans is, again, connecting the city, and also getting people to Harbor Park, and talking about doing it by Water Street. That seems to me to be more of a long-range thing, whereas it could be much more short-range if you built a sidewalk on Franklin Street where it doesn't exist. And in fact, when you get to Water Street, there's actually an entrance to Harbor Park there with a sign explaining what Harbor Park is about. So that would be something just throwing out to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's kind of in 6 different areas of the budget. And that's one of the reasons we're going towards the Parks and Rec director and the SIP planning that Sarah's talked about with the sidewalk kind of review, and that the VPI, and that could, there's a village partnership initiative which will potentially unlock tens of millions for investment in state and federal funds to reimagine this whole piece. But then the question is, do we wait for that to kind of layer that into the piece? It's kind of a 5 year from now investment, or do we just need to finish that, 100 yards on Franklin Street to kind of make that connection easier between here and the downtown? And maybe we should do that first and put it in the SIP plan as sort of an initial sidewalk, or do we wait for when the federal money's gonna come in? And then on your kind of piece on the plowing and stuff too, that's, the Parks and Rec director, in my ideal world, I think it's one of the big gaps that I've been seeing is just, we put so much in the public works team, and unlike other parts of that hasn't grown terribly large. In the wintertime, we have a lot of snowing pieces in there, but they gotta get those roads clear first, and then Main Street, the sidewalks, those are always, we can't have these car accidents, that's always gonna be second, and that team is flat out this winter, they were exhausted. We didn't have 2 extra seconds for them to be, and they want to get to the sidewalks, but they are also driving very big machinery that they need to be fresh as possible for, so I could see the Parks and Rec director and maybe some people floating in and redesigning the TIF district funding to add somebody who's on grounds or maintenance with Jim and the janitor, and getting, that we're getting a plow in our next piece, and having a separate group that it's their first priority to always be on the maintenance of our facilities, our buildings, our grounds. But there may be other ways to use that TIF funding and in different areas, but I feel like there's kind of a pressure on Public Works to do so much around here that, we need to divide some of those more buildings and grounds type pieces. So that, there was also talk of a sidewalk paver. Again, we kind of nixed that in the near term because who? Maybe that needs to just be SIP planned out. But if we have more staffing in the Public Works, Parks and Rec area, they might be able to attack those more.
One thing, I'm volunteering.
Oh, if you could go to the mic too, sorry.
I've worked with a few volunteer organizations. Volunteerism might be something to look at to help with some of the lighter task of the Public Works Department, or figuring out how the trash, when the trash is overflowing, maybe there could be some system where a local volunteer could take care of that, and even, sidewalks maybe is more technical, but, I've thought about actually the bike trails example. Maybe somebody might be willing to use a snowmobile to track down the bike path. So the whole idea of really looking into how volunteers might be able to help the city, and I think this can be the responsibility of city members, of residents, to volunteer to help the city too.
Yeah. I was in Boston a few weeks ago and just seen the Greenway and just all the people in their jackets and weeding and doing all those pieces. It takes a lot of coordination efforts too by staff but that would be a great thing to do. We had I think it was the Elks, might have been the Rotarians, volunteered to do Governor's Island, and if we have some mulch, and then I pinged over to Public Works and they're like, yeah, we got a big pile of mulch. Come do Governor's Island for us. So yeah, what can we do in that capacity too?
I'd love to see a Parks and Recreation director that had some experience with coordination of volunteers, because I think that's the parks, and that kind of low-hanging fruit that is busy work for our highway department and stuff can be volunteer work that the Parks director can coordinate with. So.
Absolutely.
Businesses too, adopt a sidewalk as well and help either fund or coordinate volunteers for that particular stretch.
So I'll just add, I didn't want to put Mike on the spot, but we did suggest maybe he come here. We had a conversation about concerns on that section of Franklin Street, from Pine Street down to Water Street, primarily safety, the speed of the cars. We had done some research, and they can go 50 miles an hour coming up over there, and people are walking on the street. And so that's the conversation that led to bring this to the city council. We had a conversation last time I was here, I don't forget what meeting it was, with the same issue about sidewalks. But there's safety issues as people are using different roads because of the backups, that they are forgetting that it's a 25-mile-an-hour zone. So that's the basis of the concern here. Let's do something before there's a tragedy in that section.
Cara?
Just a comment about Michael Reisman and Amy Reisman, who are residents on Franklin Street. The volunteer suggestion, he is way too modest, but I do want to point out that for probably the past 8 maybe 10 years, you and your wife, Amy, have been taking care of that park and have made it be what it is today. When they moved here, there were branches growing in, and you could barely see the sign that's there. So they actually, Michael is suggesting something that he's already been doing for almost a decade. So it's already happening, it's already working. And I also want to invite everyone tomorrow to show up here to City Hall and actually into the Franklin Street Parklet, because from 10 to 2, there's a volunteer day that a few people that I'm looking at have had a huge hand in working to plant a bunch of flowers and trees on Main Street. So these sort of things that we're kind of talking about are already happening, and I think we just need more communication, and there needs to be, I'm sorry to say, but more meetings, and perhaps the software that, you know, we've identified, Yodel, really is going to help with a lot of these different things to sort of elevate the message. So I think a lot of what we're talking about here is already happening, but there needs to be more of it, so thank you.
All right, should we go to overview? So I sent out the kind of the memo outlining kind of what you talked about, Patrick, before, and just what what are the highlights? What are each of the departments? I think all the numbers are in. We're landing at where we hope to be around 2.9%, or at 2.9%, with the caveat that that's the levy increase. That's not what every single taxpayer in Ellsworth is going to have as their increase. Taxes, that doesn't include new growth, that doesn't include the valuation piece. We're going to come back at a later date to have a much more robust discussion on here's the levy, here's valuation based on kind of Larry's calculations. Do we want to be at a 5% increase across the board? Do we want to be at a 3%? How that will affect. I think we've had previous spreadsheets that we can put in on just what that will do. Here's where the state valuation has us at. Here's where we're at now. We don't want to trigger a reval at some point, or maybe we do. Folks think we do need to have a revaluation, but
Those are super expensive. You do not want to have one of those.
then there we go.
$500,000.
And that was back in 2000.
Yeah, those are
It was
unbelievably
$500,000, and that was just
expensive.
residential and not commercial.
Right,
So
you don't want to do that.
got to keep up with our valuation increases. So I know this was sort of something we didn't do last year. We just sort of set it on Larry's recommendation, and then but having seen Brewer's piece and others, learning in municipal government on how they had a really robust city council discussion on valuation. I thought that was helpful. So we break down on the net appropriations. The municipal appropriations down 0.4%, schools up 5.1%, counties up 9.3%. Now those are just percentages, the kind of real dollars I have in a graph, so you can see kind of where they're at. And again, that's net including revenue. There wasn't, and on the back end here, you really have kind of your spending breakdowns by department. All of this is all detailed out in much more detail in the budget overview section, which you also have a Excel sheet on if you really want to go down the weeds. But you can kind of see the FY '25 versus '26. Some of the highlights, just for those who are listening, and I'll be posting this memo, and Nate B., who's the our amazing deputy IT director and also honorary member of the finance team, he's on a training this week, so he's putting all these things into the kind of the final published online book. So all pieces of that will be in there. But a really big push, and will be kind of my push moving forward, is to stay around the CPI level of inflation. We might not be able to get there all years. We might be a little under some years, but to kind of Steve's points on maybe that's, if we're at a 1%, we do 1.9% towards a tax stabilization fund, so that really staying around inflation, but creating rainy day funds and fiscal responsibility, so we don't have what you can see on that front page on this heart attack of a tax increase between 2020 and 2020 FY '24. You can see in other years, you can draw a mean on those lines between FY '29 and 2020. And, we've done a lot of work as a council and as a staff to sort of get the budget foundations and a new budgeting software. This last year, we did a lot of efforts, not just to revamp the budgeting process, but to actually finalize the budget software implementation so that we put the budget, it wasn't Excel sheets being passed around, the formulas are all in there, and tracked it throughout the cycle. With council, we've had the month-to-month meetings, the week-to-week meetings on finance, and then we've had the monthly Big Finance Fridays to have better overviews. I think that first work is really gonna pay more dividends this next year now that we have better actuals, like our 2024 actuals were just because of the way they were built. But now we've had 2025, targeted actuals built in the software system. Into 2026, we're gonna be able to start saying, okay, here is our revenues from last year, and are these lines not tracking? Here's our expenditures from last year and this year, and are these lines not tracking? That's gonna be a great longitudinal data set to have in there. And plus this year was the first time we also built kind of the initial staff inputs in Cassell. Like the department heads were building in Cassell the budgets. It wasn't, we did a war room last year, and everybody, department head, we kind of revamped the process one by one. And Mike was sitting in there in the war room, typing everybody's Excel things in. So now we've sort of institutionalized how we go about this, and big thanks to the department heads. It was a learning curve, I think, for them, and for me, it was a new system. I probably wasn't as clear of exactly how we could kind of get there, but that I should have been. So I'm really excited about that. There are some of the staff investment highlights. The Parks and Recreation Director, which we talked was pre-funded by about $45,000 last year, so it minimizes the year one impact. The city janitor, which is about $22,000, that includes fringe, due to the fact that we're going to be canceling once we have a hire the contracted services that we're out. So we're getting over 1,000 hours additional cleaning. It's not a full cost of an FTE. The 2 additional firefighters that we're adding to the system to kind of complete the decks, as we talked about at length, with some great presentations from Scott and the team on sort of the going to 5 per shift as the city went to a full-time ambulance and transport ambulance service, especially now that our teams are advanced life support. I really feel like this is premier Ellsworth. One of the big selling points for the city now is you have a great ambulatory care. Where I'm at in Castine now in the summer, now that MMA is not there, I have a heart attack, I would much rather live in Ellsworth, Maine. Not just because you're close to a hospital, because you get the best guys in the business at a fully staffed 24/7 ambulatory care with advanced life support training. And I think on council meetings, some really great tools to save people's lives. And it's only 1.5 is what we're budgeting this year, because I think we're kind of in reverse. We're gonna hire 2 at the jump in July, and then we have a military leave planned. So they'll be down kind of 0.5, but at the back end as opposed to the front end of the year. Additional dispatcher, which we taught, all this additional firefighter service has come with increase to the dispatchers, a big increase in their call volume, 277% since 2018. Save funds on that too. We're going to start that halfway into the year, and then additional police officer as well. They've got a great recruit that they want to get in the academy, starting halfway through the year as well. We talked about the capital improvements. Not a lot in the general fund. The dispatch console, the Norton Park splash pad resurfacing, and the police sign. But we had some surplus ban where we kind of wanted to spread out some of the capital investments we talked about. That's, I believe, on Monday's meeting, we're going to finalize that piece for the excavator, the sidewalk plow, the trench box, and the camera, and the vertical balers. And the council will have a more robust discussion on Monday on moving forward on reallocating the surplus ban to those projects, which seem to be the intent of the council. That's kind of a big part of our capital expenditure this year. So we'll talk more on Monday about that piece. And then, as we discussed a bit today, the sort of last leg of at least the 1-year capital plan for the bond cycle of Tanker 4 and the school track replacement. We had some discussion on, we probably need to dial back in what the general fund in the debt service, not at $1 million, and then we'll add in all the schools pieces too, so we have some more tracking there. Some more things for wayfinding signage. We put that in the TIF. That was a big part of the business attraction plan. It's been asked for year after year. Obviously we'll have a wayfinding signage plan. We'll come back. There'll be a lot more discussion on that, but I'm glad to be budgeted on that piece. The website redesign, which Maura and our team talked about during the budget cycle. Some of the IRCI investments we talked about here, but I'm also hearing tender from the council. We're going to be start talking and plan. It's not like that 50,000 jumps out of the door. We're going to keep doing what we're doing and funding it at a kind of maintenance level. But any type of change or expansion or piece is really that would require funding. We'll come back to the council on. citywide VoIP system, which I tried to get out of the budget to save money early on, but I guess we need new phones. Old ones we have don't match the system. They don't make parts for them anymore, and these new ones also are going to be tied to our Teams accounts and other things, and it really seemed necessary, as well as the security upgrades for the door fobbing in and out. It's an old system. I've seen this happen multiple times. People are trying to get in, their cards aren't working. The IT department's been who does so much more than IT. They're really into hardware pieces. That was an important one. Some of the workforce development and compensation stuff we talked about. We're expanding some of the professional development opportunities. We just got a couple big grants to send some of our senior leaders to a great grant program even outside of this. But also these are sort of all grant matched, like guaranteed grant matched in the professional development category, because the Alfond Foundation has a really generous program for workforce development grant matching. Switching from just the general COLA across the board to a little bit more of a robust investment in our employees, and putting some performance-based pay systems in to kind of match the performance review process that we implemented earlier in the year, and kind of formalizing some of the tuition reimbursement program, which is already in the ordinance for tagging to city service, but it wasn't budgeted for previously, so we're budgeting for it now, and we're probably going to come back to council for a little bit of a revamp on that ordinance. It's a little broad. I want to have a little more, like, this is exactly what it's for. This is how the approval process goes forward. So look for a little more on that through the year. And then what comes next? So we have the May council meeting. We got some of these band pieces. We got the June council meeting where we'll try to bring in the tax commitment decision on at least setting the dates and the getting towards that the percent valuation increase. We might need a workshop before that. It might need a little more input, or maybe some finance committee meetings. We bring up some of the valuation stuff, so it's not you come to the June meeting and you got to vote on the piece. That's a lot of information to kind of sit through right there. So I'll probably be bringing some of that with Larry and team. Before that, Chair Beal and I have had a great initial strategic planning process of how we kind of outline those larger strategic priorities for the organization, and start aligning our work plans publicly to kind of what's our plan? What's this city council doing to accomplish those priorities? Sort of what's our elevator pitch at the top level, but also how these things match up. And I'm excited. There's some areas I think we've all talked about of how we can kind of better strategize our work here. And I think we'll have a good multi-tiered plan for that. TIF is really going to drive. I feel like there's about 400,000 undesignated surplus there. What do we want? It's restricted for specific economic development type activities. We've got an RFP out to potentially reimagine the TIF to expand TIF districts. That'll be a piece of it. What to do with this unallocated surplus? Do we want to amend the TIF plan? So it had been amended many times before by Tammy and Michelle to kind of align with what the modern needs for economic development were for the city. So what's this council's, I think a lot of the kind of strategy, at least as it comes to funding post this budget cycle, will be in there, as well as there's some unallocated TIF surplus in addition to just some of the debt service falling off. So that'll be a good conversation. And then the other big one is the SIP rollout. If we don't have the full inventory of all of our depreciating assets and what the investment needs are going to be, what that debt service looks like, what are the pieces, and having some independent consultant come in, really. And then also, to me, it's having it, institutionalizing it. One of the kind of fail points with the budget, but also with the SIP planning, I can go back to Tammy's books and Michelle's books, and that was it. When I came in as city manager and I was trying to look at our capital improvement plans and our budget plans, for 3 or 4 years, they're not reliable. They're not in the 2019, 2020. Oh my gosh, these are incredible. These are what this is like, but it's not. It's 6-year-old data. I can't really. It gives me the template to do something, and that's what we base these budgets that are now built in the software system, and those are institutionalized. People go in the software. We're not passing Excel sheets around to people. They're built in the system. How do we do that with SIP too? How do we build an institutionalized system that's not based on the Excel sheets and gathering a big binder and then updating that binder every year? how do we build like a software, you know, a lot of cities and towns do it. This is not an adaptive, but a technical challenge in many ways. So let's have our full inventory of capital improvement plans, and then it's fixed likely forever. I mean, all the stuff will be broken all the time, but at least we'll have a system that's gonna kind of outlast me as city manager. Institutionalizing some of these changes is important too. And also on Monday, we'll have, we'll send around when Nate puts this in, the full budget book. We'll update the system and look back. Ebony's already looked back on kind of what some of the, how we actually say the this and this and this for each line of the budget. The school, I think, has their elections set on June 10th. Absentee ballots are out now for those that are listening and would like to vote on that budget. The municipal side is a little different. We vote as the council on it. And then last big thing is just like such an enormous amount of gratitude for Ashley, Nate, Deb and Leah, our AP and AR folks, Sarah, all our department heads. Like for every meeting we've had here, there's been, you know, half a dozen that we've had with me and the team, and for every half a dozen that I had with me and the team, like somebody brought up there, I think it was Nate, was doing a training on Microsoft Teams, and I saw his calendar, and it had like a meeting before the meeting with me. So there's people having meetings before the meetings with me, and I'm having lots of meetings before meetings with you. Like there's a ton of behind the scenes work. Pre-meeting meeting. And then we have the post meetings to kind of do the after action reports. I do want to talk in finance too as next steps, and you know, we've had some good conversation with council on like, yeah, do we streamline this next year with 2.9% if you're as a budget coming in, and or whatever CPI is next year, if it's 3.4 or if it's 2.1, you can get your department budget to that. You have no big requests, and you can, great. Sure, it's available, it's public, it'll all be there. I don't know, I think some councils disagree with that, but, and then if you get, let's stick a lot more time on the bigger stuff, on the stuff that's new, on it's affecting the budget. I think there's a fair amount of process changes, and Sarah's been taking notes because she's going to be leading the way. Finance is reporting to her next year, and I have every confidence it'll be much better than the last 2 years that I've been leading it. So, yeah. Any questions?
Questions? Yeah.
Good work.
Seriously,
Good
good
work,
work.
everybody.
This is great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Did you
much.
say municipal was
Go ahead, Nancy.
down 0.4%?
You know, it's net. There, we did get some revenue changes, and as we talked about the last finance committee meeting, there were some things that we just didn't budget revenue for, like the Betty reimbursement, tree reimbursement. We based them on an Excel sheet from 2024, and when we saw the actual, it's like, actually that's, so yes, down from the net, but our revenues have increased in categories this year as well. But we didn't exceed the revenue increase.
Which is wonderful. We
Yeah,
didn't
that's
spend
what
the
we-
revenue increase, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Take the win, Charlie.
Take
Yeah,
the
that's
win, Charlie.
So the one question I had is what to anticipate for Monday night. This is agenda item 26. It's a public hearing for the budget resolution, but I'm just trying to set like, no more presentations because we've had it. Not that we've had it, but we've had all the presentations. So Monday is the public hearing.
Just the public hearing so we can
Discussion.
vote on it, yep.
Okay, just wanted to see if I was understanding that clearly. Okay.
And is the amount will be part of that public hearing, and so people will be able to see that beforehand. Can that change before the vote, or is that what we're voting on?
Well, I mean, anything can change at the meeting, in the public hearing. If at the meeting you decide that you don't want to buy the truck or something like that, absolutely it can change. But what we should be publishing, the public hearing won't really talk about the dollars, but you'll have it on the website. Right?
Yeah, we're gonna revamp the
So-
book with, obviously you council has the log track changes, so we're gonna put all that in there. It's the numbers that are in this budget, in this memo, are, you know, will be what, you know, this $11,044,416. You know, that'll be in there. Ebony was actually looking at last month's, there's like I had to read, I think, a lot of things for this piece on each cost center or something, or can't remember exactly.
There's like a whole sheet that you have to do, between each department and the resolve, and then you have to break it into wastewater, water, capital, and it's all one vote, but you kind of have to,
Okay.
you know.
Chair, would it make sense, just because I know everybody's riveted watching right now, but for those that didn't listen to me do this kind of budget memo, we can kick it off and I can basically give a kind of the highlights and overview. And
On Monday?
On
Yeah,
Monday.
no, absolutely.
And then let people know that it's published online, if you look at both the draft version and the final version, which is, and that then we can open to public hearing and if counselors disagree.
And the whole budget's online, right? So people can see
Yes.
where the money is going. So, yeah, I mean, we just make sure that people know about that. And then you bring your summary to the meeting for the public and for us. And then it's the last chance for the council to bring anything forward that they want to change. I mean, hopefully, we've had so many meetings that I hope that everyone's, I mean, I hate to, it should be, I'm not saying it is, but it should be here. If you don't have anything else that you want to bring up, then, and you're happy with the budget, it should be that way Monday. But obviously, it's a public hearing and it's a council meeting, so everyone has the right to talk about whatever they want to do and change it. So it shouldn't be so difficult that we have to change everything at the end of at the meeting for the resolves. But the resolves are there.
Yep.
And they're broken down. I can't remember how that worked, Tammy, so for the resolves, for the council
Do you
meeting.
have it?
I'm sure I have it.
But I think even.
We did it last year, right? Yeah.
Ebony's working on it for the memo, so
Yeah.
Ebony is, she's gone through like the actual, because there was this confusion last year on the resolves and the numbers and this and that, so she's literally like going back into the video and then matching it to what we need from them. Fortunately, we talked, I think, to the finance team today, so she has those numbers based on this. based
On
on
that,
what we talked
okay.
about.
I can chat with her tomorrow morning as well.
Okay.
And see how-
Well, you did it for 20 years, 20 times.
And I just want to add, I'm on the city website, and front and center is budget information.
Oh, perfect.
And there's a page with a narrative. There is a budget meeting playlist. I've never been part of a playlist before, but
Oh,
where people can watch them in the budget document. And again, I'm sure they'll update when it's done, but I was a little concerned about, is it visible? It's front and center.
It's
You
front and
can't miss
center.
it when you go there. So I think getting some social media out there about when the new budget book is out.
Yeah.
It's here, you really can watch each and every one of our, how many workshops?
There's been 8 or 9 on this one.
100?
Oh, come on, that was last
About
year,
10
John.
less than last
Yeah, I was gonna say, not as many as last year.
And no crying.
Maybe like
so
6 or
it's
7.
good.
And I think next year we can streamline a little more. I feel like we can, there's a way to dial it in a bit, but, yeah, that was a big piece, not a change from this year, but last year, just getting that draft budget online so people could see it, and
Yeah,
if
and
citizens
if you
had
know,
like,
it's
hey,
just-
I don't like this, I don't like that,
Right.
then getting the final, and then being able to have both of those pieces, having all the videos in one place, so it's, you're not trying to find some, it's just
It's really good
ellsworthmaine.gov/budget.
to see it.
And we even had a timeline, which we fast-tracked by a month, but we've, and I did check out the charter, it's second week in April is when the city manager is required to submit the budget by, but we were first week in March, so. I think we could be even a little earlier maybe next year. if we're gonna-
And the-
I think we
Sorry,
did.
Sarah.
Sarah, and that's the royal we?
The royal you, that's the royal you.
I would like to thank everybody. This is, and I'm not going to speak for Tammy, but when I decided to run for the council, it's because I was sitting in a meeting and they were talking about the general fund and some other things, and I'm like, there's just no possible way that can be correct.
That's exactly what we said. We're like, there's no way that general fund could be that high.
Exactly. And so we were talking, and then we started looking through, and there was just no information for financial information. There was nothing. And I couldn't imagine how budgets were even being passed. And we sat through the first budget and had next to nothing for information. We didn't have any actuals. We were going by previous year's budgets, and which weren't even accurate themselves. And so having this year and is just fantastic. I'm going through this, and I know all of the hard work that everyone has put into this, and Charlie and the staff, and I just can't tell you how appreciative I am. And I actually, for the first time since I've been on the council, I feel comfortable with a vote on the budget and not just crossing my fingers that, that it's gonna be correct. So thank you. Thank you very, very much, everybody.
I can speak to that a little bit further. Sometimes we get caught up in daily life, and in 13 or 14 months, this has done a 360-degree turn in all of the data that is available to us now. It is just incredible. I think the next step, and I'm sure that you won't be amused by this, but the next step is to stop getting people to submit money spending ideas to the finance department. Meaning, spending money. You're taking all of this data and you're putting it down and letting us see it. Now, if we could slow down the ask of all the money being spent, not by you folks, but by department heads, and stop all of this big spending. I think we're seeing the numbers here, and they're great numbers, but I wish they were smaller.
Thank you all. We'll see you tomorrow at Finance and then Monday as well.
Do you want to meet for another 10 minutes, or is it okay to quit now?
No, we're good.
You said you want to
Really? 50